Let us give attention to the reading of the word. If you would stand for the reading of the gospel, which comes to us today from the gospel according to Mark, the 12th chapter, verses 41 through 44. Again, that's Mark chapter 12, verses 41 through 44. Hear the reading of the word. He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." Thus ends the reading of the word. Amen. I want to talk just for a few moments from the subject, when commendation is really critique. When commendation is really critique. Beloved, let's just rehearse this story for the sake of the narrative and for the progression of the sermon. Jesus is in the temple. And interestingly enough, he's not concerned with the center of worship where the offerings are taking place or the offerings are given, the sacrificial offerings and the rams and all of that. But Jesus is opposite, interestingly enough, the receptacle for the treasury, the place where people give their money. He's acutely interested and keenly observant of what's going down in the moment. As Jesus sits and watches, he sees wealthy person after wealthy person coming and dropping in their tithe, to use a modern analogy, big checks with a whole lot of zeros. And then all of a sudden comes this poor widowed woman. You can picture her however you choose. She may have been bent over. She may have had some age and mileage on her life. She may have been disheveled and unkempt. However you imagine her, she becomes the point of commendation in the passage. For Jesus calls his disciples as she gives what we know today as the widow's mite. 2 small copper coins that amount to about a penny. Many of us would look with disdain upon her because she gave such a small amount, a fragmented offering. 1 penny composed of 2 copper coins. And yet Jesus, in summoning his disciples, tells them everybody before her gave out of their wealth, but she has given more than all of them because she gave everything she had. Everything to live off of. Her entire estate worth 1 penny, 2 copper coins she put in the treasury to honor God. Jesus recognizes her gift, but is that the real point of the passage? Many of us have heard through the years sermons and Sunday school lessons and Bible studies about this poor widow's mite, and we've heard the general slant on interpretation is that this woman has given more than all, and she is to be commended for what she's done. Her sacrifice is recognized. Her generosity is heralded. Her willingness to serve is noted by none other than Jesus Christ himself. And the usual point of the hermeneutic history is that that's the way all of us should be. We should give, and we should learn to have a burgeoning commitment. Certainly, beloved, as we continue to see a decline in Christianity in the nation, our commitment ought to be challenged. We have just recently learned that the nation is now at about 64% identifiable Christians. And in a few years, that number may decrease to as low as 30 to 35%. Many folks that have been raised in the church, brought up in the church, nurtured by the church, groomed by the church, are losing faith and becoming a part of the none category. No church affiliation, no belief, and they are becoming agnostic or atheist. Certainly our commitment needs challenging. However, that's not what this text is really about. This commendation, this recognition on the part of Jesus Christ of a widow's mite is in actuality a critique of a religious system that is shaped by a formality that loses its vitality in the process. Jesus is here looking at a system that is more about governance than grace. That's more about giving rather than blessing. They are more concerned here about poor widows having to offer everything. They're more concerned about the contribution than compassion. It is a searing critique. Jesus notices what she gives, but he looks behind the veil of her giving to find a system in place. From religious headquarters, no doubt, that requires a poor widow, the most vulnerable of the society, to give everything that she has. Now, praise be to God, Jesus does see what we do. He does continue to recognize our contributions, but he's also rendering a critique. In fact, in the previous verses, he tells his disciples, beware of the scribes, for they like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in public places. And they like to have the best seats in the synagogue. And they like to have the places of honor when anyone throws a banquet. In fact, they devour widows' houses. And they like to pray long in the public place. They will receive the greater condemnation. Here, beloved, what Jesus is critiquing is a religion that has grown so formal that it's rigid and cold, and those that should be taken care of are now really the ones taking care of the Lord's business. And I submit to you that sometimes religion can become so formal that it becomes Pharisaic. It is then more governed more by, it is guided more by governance than grace, more by rules than righteousness, more by contribution than compassion. And it can only then degenerate into a level of hypocrisy that has a form of religion, but denies the power thereof. Jesus, I would submit to you, is not looking for a rule-bound religion, but he's looking for a religion that has a kind of triangularity. A triangularity that says that we first and foremost ought to love God with all of our hearts, our minds, and our souls, and then our neighbors as ourselves. That's the triangularity that makes religion vital. It is not about the registration and the recognition and the observation of formal rules. But is there any love in it? Is there any love of God? And is there any love of neighbor? And I would submit to you that when religion takes on a primary emphasis of the love of God, then it has a certain vitality. That's when worship becomes real. That's when study becomes exciting and revelatory. That's when fellowship becomes something that fosters community, and you gotta crave it and you miss it because you haven't had contact with the folks of God. When you love God first. But then, beloved, you can't just say you love God without loving others as well as yourself. Now notice here, the love ethic of Jesus requires that we love God, but that we also love neighbor as we love ourselves. Here Jesus is getting at something in this triangular, this triad of love, that if you love your neighbor, it's a sign that you love God, but it's also indicative that you love yourself. Because you recognize that if I love my neighbor, if I take care of my neighbor, then I'm also taking care of myself. Because if my neighbor is hurting, then I'm hurting. If my neighbor is faltering, then I'm faltering. If my neighbor is prospering, then I'm prospering. And so it behooves me to love God and also love my neighbor. But we love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And I would submit to you that sometimes what we deem love and unconditional love is really infatuation. It's an idea of love. It's playing with an ideal of love, because if you love yourself, then you won't put up with abuse in other relationships. Too much of what we deal with is not a lack of unconditional love. It's the fact we tolerate too much stuff because we think that in tolerating other folks' foolishness, we're loving ourselves. But if you love yourself, then sometimes you won't put up with other folks' mess. You love yourself, you love your neighbor, and ultimately you love God. And when that takes place, there is a vitality to the faith and the religion. That's what Howard Thurman called the religion of Jesus. rather the religion about Jesus. The Pharisees had a penchant for observation of rules. Thou shalt not do this and that. And sometimes we come with that legalistic perspective even to church today. You can't come to church unless you got the right attire on. Can't touch the communion table because it's holy, but yet you can cuss your neighbor out in the context of community. Laws, rules, and regulations without any love is a Pharisaic religion. So then we love as the Pharisees and the scribes did the pomp and circumstance of worship without authentic worship. We love the accoutrements of community. You look nice today. We like the compliments, but are you concerned about my soul? Here Jesus compliments this woman for all that she gives, but it is really a critique of a religion that is governed by rules rather than grace. And so he says, but then there is a subtle and unstated suggestion. If you really want to have a vital religion, then you got to have a religion where poor people are valued, where the vulnerable are protected, where the marginalized are connected with, where the downtrodden are uplifted, where the outcast is welcomed, where the never-do-well is encouraged to fulfill his or her destiny in God. That's the suggestion, that you got to have a faith and a religion and a walk with God that sees the relationship between people greater than you see the relationship with God. Because that is the religion of Jesus. You can't just come to church, view church, have your own little private worship, and not be concerned about somebody else. That incurs an insightful and incisive critique from the divine. And beloved, we ought to all have the desire to have a faith that God can be pleased with. One that embodies that old hymn, if I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can show beauty where there's ugliness, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can lift up someone who's fallen down on their journey, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can encourage the one who's going through the darkest valley of the shadow of death, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can encourage a child to thrive and succeed when the odds are stacked up against them, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can feed somebody who's got a swollen belly due to hunger, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can pay the light bill of somebody who does not have the basic necessities, then my living shall not be in vain. And I just want to live so God can use us anytime and anywhere. Make sure that we don't get caught up in the superficialities of religious concern and observation, lest we incur the critique of Jesus. He juxtaposes a widow's mite against the wealth of the establishment. And he lifts her up as not a commendation, but to say, you missed it. You failed. Certainly, we don't want Jesus to look at us and say, you missed it. You failed. I think I shared with you before, a few years ago when you allowed me to go on sabbatical, the family and I went to Regina Monday, the Liberation Church in South Africa. And there in the church, there's a statue of Jesus. And our tour guide took us around the church, and he showed us the registry of all of the folks who had attended the church. President Zuma had been there. Previous President Thabo Mbeki had been there. Nelson Mandela had been there. And while that was impressive, he was really not concerned about that. He pointed us to the statue of Jesus, not an uncommon figure in a Catholic church, but what made this statue unique was Jesus had outstretched arms with no hands. And when we asked the guide what happened to Jesus' hands, he said, well, because this is the Freedom Church of South Africa, this is the place where liberation theology is born and practiced in the South African context of apartheid, it was probably shot off when the police attacked the church. But we like to think that we are the hands of Jesus in the world. We are the ones that are charged with lifting and loving. We are the ones that are required to stoop low and pick up the least. We are the hands of none other than Jesus himself. Beloved, that's our charge, that's our duty, that is our holy obligation. So don't get caught up on the rules. The rules are going to have to be broken. We're in a new age. The previous rules really no longer apply. That's why we're going to update not our constitution, but our bylaws on Thursday night coming. Because we are in a new age. But while the ground is shifting, let us never forget that we are called to love God and then love our neighbors as we love ourselves. That's the word for the day. There may be one who feels some sense that I am now free. I used to operate under the false assumption that I couldn't come to church unless I had my best dress on or my most appropriate suit and tie, that I couldn't come unless my nails were done and my hair was laid, fried, dyed, and laid to the side. I couldn't come unless I looked the part of a Christian. But what Jesus taught us in this lesson is that the real Christian is not the one who has on the good clothes or drives the nice car, but the real Christian is the one who loves God and loves their neighbor as themselves, who's willing to sacrifice and become the hands of none other than Jesus himself. If that's a mission that you want to undertake, if you want to get free today from all of the things that hold you back and you thought that religion was so formal that it really didn't care about your soul, I'm here to correct you. There is one who is the lover of our souls, and he cares for us to the point that he died on an old rugged cross that we might be free. Free from the thou shalt nots and liberated into the thou shalt live and not die. Thou shalt rejoice in the presence of God. Thou shalt inherit the land. Praise be to God. The Lord offers us more thou shalls than thou shalt nots. So if you are perched and poised to be the beneficiary of one of Jesus's thou shalts, then we invite you to come, whether you are here in person or whether you are online. We extend the invitation now to discipleship of Jesus Christ. Won't you come, as this is the moment for which you can connect with God through Jesus Christ and connect with the body of Christ, the church, so that you might have a meaningful purpose to life. We extend the invitation. Won't you come? If there are those with prayer requests, we invite you to put those in the chat, and we shall pray for them in a matter of moments. We extend now the invitation. Won't you come?